We're live. Hi, welcome to our live stream. Come on up, Stan. We are just getting situated here, and we're ready to start taking some questions. And welcome. We're Stan and Alicia at the Honey Company, and we are doing a live Ask Me Anything session. So we've been collecting questions and comments from across the internet that people have asked, like on text or Instagram DMs and other places that we thought we would answer live for you today. And then if you have a comment, then you can put it in the chat function, the chat box, and we will answer your questions too. Let's see, I didn't know about that. Okay, so Stan, you want to say anything?
Well, I was just thinking I'd like to comment on how nice the bees are this year. I'm reluctant to do so, though, because as soon as you say something like that, you get stung.
Mm-hmm.
But yesterday, for the first time I think I can remember, and I don't recommend doing this at home. I'm just saying that the bees were so nice yesterday. I didn't have any gloves on or any veil. I was in the hives all day long, and never had a mad bee chase me at all.
Wow.
So it sure makes beekeeping a lot nicer, especially on a hot day when you don't have to be in your full bee suit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying that was just something I noticed yesterday. Bees were awfully nice. They were real sweeties.
Awesome. Welcome, Joe from Elam Woodworks and Apiary. Thanks for joining us. Let us know where you're from so we kind of have an idea of that. And then, he says to tell me about your bees. You want to talk about your feral bee project?
Sure. This year we are actually trying some Russian bees. They're supposed to be more mite resistant. Maybe I'll take some Russian bees down to our feral bee mating locations and let them cross with the ferals and see what happens. I don't know. Supposedly, when you cross the Russians, they get a little bit cross. I don't know. But in short, the feral bee project is an attempt by us to mix back into the gene pool some of the genetics that we've taken out. We, as in the commercial bee industry, have bred honeybees for specific things, mostly brood rearing, and therefore a bigger workforce, which means a bigger honey crop. So we've selected certain traits that aren't necessarily the best things for the bees. Uh, so we're trying to put those things back so the bees are capable of surviving on their own. They don't require so much help from beekeepers to stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
So we still haven't solved the bee health issues that we've been going through for a long, long time. So we're catching wild bees and mixing them back into our gene pool. So that's the Feral Bee Project. This is taking place mostly down in southern Utah. It's not the Washington County, St. George area. There's some Africanized bees down there, but we haven't encountered any really mean bees at the other corner, Four Corners area. That's where we're doing this. So if you've been following our Feral Bee Project, it's kind of a fun thing. We're making an attempt to do something, which a lot of beekeepers aren't. They're waiting for somebody else to do something. So I realize that many hobbyists can't really do anything other than support somebody like us here at the Honey Company who is trying to do something. But I guess I'm not afraid to say some of the commercial beekeepers out there that have the ability to do so need to step up, start testing for genetics, start using genetics that has some potential to solve the problem rather than just coasting, rather than just relying on somebody else to do it. Because the PhDers at the Bee Lab haven't got it done yet. Come on.
We'll get it. But so the idea is that the bees are surviving out in the cliffs. In our area, it's not very many trees, but there are a few trees. They're surviving out in the cliffs and trees of southern Utah in the middle of the desert with like no human intervention. So we're going down there. It's taking virgin queens and then kicking out all the drones from the hive so he doesn't corrupt the gene pool down there.
Yeah.
And mating those virgin queens with the drones in that area. Any clarifying questions that you have, Joe? Happy to answer those. We'll give it a second. Sometimes YouTube has a lag on comments posting. So while we're waiting on that, do you want to answer some of these that other people have submitted?
Yeah.
Over. Okay. So the first question somebody asked was they had an accident and spilled some honey. So what do you do with spilled honey?
I would feed it back to bees. There's depending on where you spilt it and what might have got mixed in with it, but most of the time it's good enough for bee food. They'll clean it up. Of course, you of course wouldn't want to use it for human consumption, but you could feed it back to the bees. So, feeding honey back to the bees, you might want to dilute it so it's more like a thinner syrup instead of thick honey. That way, the bees won't get stuck in it; they can pick it up easier. Uh, so, feed it back to the bees just like you would be mixing up some table sugar, sucrose, and feed it to the bees.
Are there any times when you wouldn't want to feed it back to the bees? Like if it spills on like motor oil or something, you wouldn't want to do that, right?
Yeah, if you're extracting on the floor in the garage and you got motor oil and who knows what's in it, but I think that's probably pretty rare occasion. People are sensible enough not to extract in a place where
It's gross.
it's terribly gross. So
Okay.
if you don't feed it back to them, they're just going to come get it anyway. You're going to have bees in your garage or wherever you're extracting. So yeah, so I wouldn't feed bees. Well, like for example, just today I found a colony that had some foul brood in it. I don't know if it's EFB or AFB, but I'm reluctant to let the bees rob that out, or because there could be some disease foul brood spores in there that would go back to the colonies wherever the robber bees came from. So that's one occasion when you wouldn't want to feed bees honey, but most of the time it's okay to do so.
Awesome. Okay, well, Joe says no, not now. Just keep seeing folks working on needed projects. Keep it going. And he's from Powder Springs, Georgia. So thanks for responding to our questions. Okay, so the next question is kind of a detailed one, but I'll summarize it, I guess. So there was a person who thought their bees were swarming, but when they went and checked in the hive, this is Bethany from Fairview, and when she checked in the hive, she found that the whole hive was empty and all the bees were gone. But she found the swarm of bees and she got them and put them back in the box. And then she's wondering if she should move her hive and if she can take that hive in her suburban.
Suburban beekeeping, yeah, yeah, we do some of that. We live in the suburbias and we drive a suburban. So, however you use it for bees, great. So there was a couple of interesting things about that one. We assumed naturally that the swarm came out of her existing hive, but when she looked in that hive, there were no bees in it. So we don't know if that swarm absconded and was what landed on the porch nearby, or if it was a swarm that came from somewhere else. In any case, she caught them and moved them, and I think it turned out okay. So we need a report from her before we can follow up on that story. So there was no queen bee in it, and we got a new queen bee introduced to them. I think successfully. I don't know yet. So we've had a couple of calls this year about reports that their bees were swarming. So or at least they were getting ready to swarm. One of those was bees were doing they were doing the line dance. They were doing a social dance. They were washboarding. So the person assumed they were bearding, and they were worried that they were bearding because they were getting ready to swarm. So it wasn't the case. The bee dances mostly have been deciphered by a bunch of different people at different times, but I don't know that anybody has solved the washboarding dance. We don't know what that's about for sure, but I don't think unhealthy bees washboard, and they're not washboarding because they're thinking of swarming. Well, we were pretty sure of that. And washboarding is different than bearding. So yeah, it was hot out, but I think bees generally, when they're washboarding, it's a healthy sign. We just don't know exactly what it means yet. So what would bees be doing outside the hive? They could be bearding. They could be getting ready to swarm. They could be swarming. They could be washboarding. There's several different reasons, and can sometimes it can be tricky uh, to guess which one. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to swarm if there's bees on the outside of the hive.
How do you know if the difference? Like when they do swarm, they often beard outside the hive. So how do you know?
Well, I don't think bearding is the necessarily a sign of swarming. It just means that they're too
Full.
crowded in there. So when they get too crowded, then they start thinking about swarming. So that means there's honey in places where the brood should be, and so if they're too crowded, then naturally they're going to be outside the hive, hanging on the outside if it's warm out.
Yeah. Do you know by so? Let's see. Tori, thanks for your comment. She said, or they said, do you know by doing an inspection, like
Yeah.
if they're about swarming?
Yeah, generally when I'm worried, I found this spring especially, I've noticed it more so when I'm stressed about what's going on in the bee yards is because I'm not in the beehive. So we could avoid a lot of trouble and missteps and questions if you just open that hive up and take those frames out. They made Langstreth came up with the idea for removable frames inside of a hive for a reason. That's so we can take them out and inspect them. So we need to do that. I even know some commercial beekeepers that never look in the bottom box, and well, maybe they get away with that, but they'd be better beekeepers if they did on occasion. You need to know what's going on down there. So take your frames out and look through them, inspect for queen cells and for the amount of honey and the amount of brood. There's only one way to know that. So if you're worried about what your bees are doing, it's probably because you're not in the hive. So chances are, if you get in there, you'll see some things. And even if you don't really know for sure what you're looking for, open the hive up and look in there and just try to observe things generally as you can. And so when you do send in a question on a live chat, or you do read a bee book, or you make a phone call to your beekeeper, then your mentor is going to have some questions for you, and they can help you figure out what's going on in your beehive because you've been through it and you've observed pollen and you've honey and brood and unsealed brood and capped over brood and queen cells and or
The timing of eggs or whatever.
yeah, or mice or whatever. You'll have some basis to answer some questions and analyze and think about what's going on.
So one thing, I'll just mention we just released this beekeeping printables book, and we have a lot of people that are asking questions like, "What do I look for when I get in my hive?" You know, they're like, they just wonder, like, what do I look for? What are signs? What are some? So we created this printable inside of this book, and it's kind of the centerfold, and it's summer hive inspections, and it goes through and tells you like what to look for. So I mean, there could be other things that you could look for that are not on this list, but we try to get, the most common things that would help you the most. So it talks about like the growth of the hive. Do they have enough room? Is there honey? Are they healthy from the outside? Are they healthy from the inside? Are you tracking your varroa mites? How is my queen? And other questions like that. So we recommend getting this book. It will really help you to know what to look for when you're inspecting your hives in the summer. And so this comes as a printed book like this, or it comes as a PDF that you could just instantly download. You can print this as many times as you want or photocopy it. The physical copy also comes with a PDF too. Anyway, so recommend getting this book and using it as you're inspecting your hives over the summer. It really helps you know what you're looking for. We've got a bunch of comments here. Awesome. So Pete Peterson, hi. He says, do you still trap for swarms out in the wild far from houses and farms? And if so, what percentage of those bees have been very hardy?
Oh, so I have to be full disclosure. In all honesty, we 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 put out. I built 25 swarm traps this last spring, and got most of them hung up in trees. Still haven't had any volunteers to move into one of my off traps. Now I've got a couple of swarms this spring, but they're ones that just volunteered to move in a bunch of dead out pile of boxes somewhere. or ones that I caught in the tree but not in a trap.
Mhm.
So I wish I had. I'm feeling a little bit inadequate about my trapping abilities here. So we made sure we got the right size. So if we have enough time, I just repeat some of the things that I've been learning about swarm trapping. Back in 1990, the USDA and the Mexican government teamed up. I'm reading this out of the Hive of the Honeybee. I'm just quoting the study they did there. They put out 200,000 swarm traps. And out of those 200,000 swarm traps, they got 80,000 colonies, 80,000 hives. They moved into their bait hive, and 60,000 of those were Africanized. This was down in Mexico. So they were trying to track the migration of the Africanized honeybee up through from Brazil, and they didn't know at the time, I guess, know how far it was going to keep going. Thankfully, they stalled out at Texas, Southern California, and Arizona. For all they knew at the time, they were going to keep going all the way to Canada. But anyway, so that is just a massive project. So me just trying to put out 25 swarm traps was a big deal. Took a whole bunch of time. I couldn't even imagine putting out swarm traps on that scale. Anyway, the reason I started telling that story was they learned some things in the process of doing that. They learned how high they want the bees off of the ground, how high the bees prefer their nest off the ground, about 15 feet. They learned where they like the entrance to the hive. They like it below, an entrance at the bottom of the cavity, and the volume of the cavity, minimum 10 gallons, which is about the exact size of a 10 frame Langstroth deep hive as we use them. So that's a bit awkward proportions though to be hanging in trees, and so we usually make the swarm traps a little bit narrower. So maybe a 7 or 8 frame size of trap with more space in the bottom to make up for the volume. Um, anyway, we learned a lot of those things. So I studied up on all of that, and I made some traps that were that conformed to what the bees want. It's interesting that when we build these traps, we are more interested in what the bees want in housing than we are when we take them out of their swarm trap and put them in another hive, as in top bars or Warrays or even whatever Langstroth. So we're very specific in accommodating the bees on what they want in housing. So, but I haven't caught anything yet.
So, but he has had a lot of success. Like, he knows where some wild colonies are. Like, people give him referrals, or he finds them in the desert. Finds a water source, sees bees, and tracks them back. So he has been able to find some wild colonies that way, but none have moved into his swarm traps.
Yes. So we've done some cutouts. We've done that kind of thing with feral bees, but I haven't obtained any of these genetics that we're using by them volunteering to move in to one of my purposely set traps. And anyway, I'll keep you posted. Keep asking me that question. I'm going to catch them sometime.
Okay, so Tori says, I'm a first-year beekeeper, started with 2 to 5 frame nukes. Now I have 7 colonies. It's been so fun. Like, just a general comment.
Yeah.
Awesome. We're glad that you're trying out this fun hobby and help to the environment. And
bees are addicting. So is honey.
All right. So I'm looking through. I don't see any questions there, but I have another one. We have a lot of questions about at this time of year about that sun is getting right at us. Okay. We have a lot of questions this time of year about how to know if hives are queen right. Can you talk about what that looks like in a hive when it's queen right? So we have questions about like laying workers and just like, how do I know if my queen's okay in there as you're inspecting your bees?
Yeah. So then I just went on a little rant about getting inside your beehive, and so you know what's going on. There's lots of things that you can tell outside the beehive before you get in there. So if the hive seems to be humming, there's lots of foragers coming and going. There's pollen coming in, and those are a few things you can tell outside the beehive before you even get into them. So bees sometimes land on you for a drink of water. I think if it's a hot, sweaty day like this. So, but queen right colonies, of course, going to have brood, and there's a few exceptions to that. If she's not been mated yet, so if you've got a situation where there's a virgin queen in there, and everything seems fine, but you don't see eggs, that queen may just not be laying yet. But otherwise, you're going to see all the necessary things for a hive to progress in there if it's queen right. You'll see them drawing out wax, depending on the time of year. You'll see honey coming in. You'll see pollen in there. You'll see brood in all the different stages. You'll see eggs. So those are the things to look for. So if you the first, it's a tendency for beekeepers if they're unsure of what's happening in their hive, they're all of a sudden they're worried about the queen. Well, blame it on the queen. Well, and many times rightfully so. But if you can identify eggs and you can identify larvae and the difference between capped over brood and capped over honey, then it'll make it a lot easier for you to guess or assume that the hive is queen right. Mm-hmm. So those are the few things to look for. So you won't know exactly for sure until you see the queen 100% identification. But if a hive is bringing in lots of pollen, we assume they're raising brood with it. So it's not always the case. You'll see some bees bringing in pollen, even if the queen's gone. They got laying workers. Well, if they got laying workers, well, they got to have something to feed those drones in the worker cells too. So they'll be collecting some pollen for a while until they fizzle out. So, but if you're seeing pollen come in a serious amount, you could probably assume without even looking in the hive that they've got brood. So.
And they just seem more happy and organized, and
yep, and
like they're just doing their thing.
There's a noise. You can gather some information by the noise that the hives make when you pop the lid on there. If they're queen right, they're usually just quiet and keep going about their business, unless you excessively smoke them or something. But a colony that's not queen right will be slightly agitated. They might be a little more inclined to sting. They'll be a little more buzzy when you get in there, and they'll be a little flighty. They'll be running around kind of disorganized like when you open up the hive. So they don't have that content.
Sometimes they're mad.
Yeah, sometimes they get mad. They're not as happy when their queen's missing. So those kind of things come with time, though. When you've experienced both many times, and you kind of intuitively know when you pop the lid open if there's something wrong or if everything seems right. So not only a visual inspection, but also you can hear what they're doing and observe visually what's going on there, and come to a conclusion that way.
It just, when you said like hear it, reminds me, he just wrote like this article called "Smells in the Hive" this winter, and I was thinking about like you can't really describe that virtually. You kind of just have to smell it. But remember, right?
You got a frame of foul brood right now. I wish you could smell it, because that's really how you identify when there's a brood disease, when there's foul brood in there. So you don't dare keep those frames around if occasionally I have one, because I don't want it to spread. So I don't know what to do. Wish we could can the smell and bring it to the bee meeting, but anyway.
Something you have to experience, and hopefully you don't.
Yeah, we don't want you to experience that, but it's nice to be able to diagnose it correctly.
Yep. And if you have a lot of colonies and over a lot of years, you probably will see it, but hopefully you don't. Okay, and then let's see, what is a laying worker, and like tell us about laying workers.
So worker bees, they're all females, and so they can lay eggs. They just don't mate early in their development like the queen bee does. And so when they lay an egg, it's unfertile. So that unfertilized egg can only develop into a drone. So as a last ditch effort for the colony that's failing to contribute to the gene pool, the workers can begin to lay eggs. Those drones are viable. They can go out to the drone congregation and mate with a queen bee. So they can still make a contribution to the gene pool that way. So that's what laying workers are all about. So if the queen has been gone for maybe 2 weeks, then and they're hopelessly queenless, then's the time when the laying workers will start. So it happens in the absence of queen pheromone and brood pheromone, that they'll begin to lay eggs. So it's hard to correct that when they've gone down that road too far. It's difficult to get them to accept a new queen bee, but it's possible to do. We've had just made a few videos on how to correct laying workers or solve that problem. So
They're in editing phase.
okay, they're still being edited, but
We have some other ones, but
look forward to those coming up soon.
so do you want to tell the story about the colony with laying workers that you tried to fix and by combining it with the strong colony?
Okay, yeah, we tried. I was taking a shortcut, so
hang on just a sec till the
Yeah.
ATVs pass.
we're kind of by the road. We got lots of ATVers out.
We don't have much traffic, but when it does come by, they're loud. It's a small town, but ATVs are legal on the streets here. So anyway,
So because I have a bunch of colonies, this is easier to do. There's always a colony or two that's got laying workers that I need to do something with. And so if I shake them out into a queen right colony, the queen right colony, if it's fairly strong anyway, will reform those laying workers. So once they've joined a colony that has brood and queen pheromones in there, then it'll shut down their laying tendency. So that inclination will go away. But in the meantime, there might be a little bit of a dispute inside the hive. So to take a precaution that those laying workers and the bees from another colony don't object to the new queen, then I put her in a cage. And you only need to put her in there for a day or two. It could be a push-in cage, or it could be one of the mailing cages, California mini cage or something like that. So once they've combined and any arguments about the queen bee are over, then you can let her out. That only takes a day or so. So I've successfully joined a bunch of those this year. And this occasion, though, I thought, well, maybe it was a really strong colony that was queen right. But it was quite a few bees from a queenless colony that we put in there. So there was some dispute. There were some dead bees out front because they argued, some of them argued about it. Anyway, the queen came up missing. So I should have put the queen in a cage first. That was a mistake. That was a rookie mistake on my part. But occasionally you might get away with that. But in this case, we didn't. So if I only had one or two colonies, that would be expensive and it would slow things down and cause a lot of problem. So I'm raising new queen bees all the time. So we've always got queen cells coming up, and we've always got some mated queens on hand. So it's no big deal to just throw a new queen in, no problem. But for most people, you wouldn't want to do that. Take the precautions so you don't slow yourself down and miss a honey crop by making a mistake like that.
Yeah, and I noticed that. I know you've said before that you prefer like the pushing cages because then she can continue laying.
Yeah, that helps too. So if you have a pushing cage, the bigger the better. Then she has access to some cells to lay in. I don't know if you're only leaving in there for a day. I don't know how much it'll slow things down, but she does smell better. Her pheromones are stronger when she's laying eggs, and so if you want new bees to accept a queen, the better she smells, the better, and that takes place if she continues laying eggs rather than being shut down, put in a queen bank in a 3-hole or a mini cage for a while.
Yeah.
So.
Do you want to talk about how you can sometimes introduce a queen cell?
Yeah, you can. So queen cell is 2 weeks slower than introducing a mated queen, depending on your weather, maybe longer. But generally, you get best acceptance if you put a queen cell in. So if she emerges in the colony, then she's almost always accepted. They pretty much ignore a new queen that's just emerged from a cell. It's only a day old. They generally don't argue with that. So that's good and bad. You might have queen cells. If you have more than one colony, you might have some queen cells in one of your other colonies. There could be supersedure cells in there at any given time. Um, it's hard to get a queen cell though if you don't have one of your own. It's not likely that you're going to buy one. So you can't. There are people that sell them. You can buy queen cells, but it's not the best way to do it.
They're like harder to transport and stuff.
Yeah, they're harder to ship. It can be done, but it's better if you know somebody in your bee club that's got some queen cells if you want to do that, or some from your own, because they're too hard to ship, too delicate to ship.
Do you want to show them those queen cells that you brought over, like this?
Yeah, this was
a comb with some queen cells. Maybe the other piece is bigger.
Yeah, this was out of okay. This was a mistake. So this is upside down right now. But I left 2 frames out of one of our nukes this spring, and there's 3 queen cells there and 1 here, and they all of those queens emerged at the same time. Usually they stagger those a little bit. So, but you can see the nice round hole in the end of each one of those where the queens emerged, and then they would have fought it out. You'll see holes in the side of these too, but that's just the demolition crew coming in after the queens have emerged and tearing the cell down or recycling it. So that's what's going on there with these queen cells. I thought that was kind of interesting. So not only did I slow this colony down by leaving a couple frames out, so now later I had to come in and do a cutout inside of a hive and put them in a frame, one of my handy dandy middle bar frames, but also they had slowed themselves down to requeen. That was supersedure cells.
Yeah.
So that's what happened in that one
Awesome.
yesterday, and I did all this cutout too. Usually they'll get pretty upset when you do something this invasive, but I didn't have any bees get mad at me yesterday.
That's fortunate. All right. Do you want to show them the hive you brought?
I did bring a hive over. Let's have a question about that requires inside the hive answers. So if somebody has a question right now, we can open up a hive and look inside of it if you'd like to. So,
yeah. And Pete Peterson says, do you have a culling program for your bee breeding program?
A culling program, yeah. Yeah, it's called winter. So if they're alive in the springtime, great. So we have done some testing before. We got the liquid nitrogen, and we freeze some brood. Incidentally, speaking of the handy dandy middle bar frame, if you wanted to do a freeze test, it makes it easy to cut out a piece of brood out of the foundationless middle bar. You could stick that in the freezer, and then carefully handle it so you're not damaging the caps on the comb. So then when you put it back in the hive where you cut it out from, and you wait for a day, and you see how many of them they've cut out that they've uncapped and removed, then you can get a percentage of how hygienic your hive is. Mm-hmm. So we've done some of that kind of tests, and so that'll tell us a lot. We've tested for mites before, these kinds of things. There's lots of tests you can do, but really we're at a point right now where if they make it through the winter in good shape, then there's a good breeder queen right there.
We're going with the survival stock mixed with pharaoh bees.
Yes. So
right.
If we had to, we could get more specific than that, but really we're not that far along in testing for very specific traits. We're just testing for bees that stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep. And yeah, may the best bees win.
Yeah.
So let's move over to the hive. I'm gonna have to just pick up the computer. I don't have another camera set up, but the lighting will be better over there too. All right. Okay, we'll see if we can get this. We're on a little bit of a hill here. Let's see. All right. So you're going to probably need to go low as you're doing that, Stan.
Okay.
And then kneel down, or do you want to try to sit down or something?
I'll use this.
Do you have anything? Oh yeah, that's perfect. You can sit right there. Do you have anything specific that you brought this hive over to show, or?
No, this hive's. I think it's this is one of our Russian queen bees we got this year, doing well. I don't know if there's anything specific in here. That's what your question's for. So if you're watching this and you got a question about something right now and you want to see inside of a hive, you'll have to ask. So otherwise, we're just going to expect a perfectly healthy colony.
Okay, I might be able to go a little closer. Okay, so Marmy's farmhouse says in 8 years I've lost 6 hives, 1 to mites positive, and the others absconded. I am harvesting honey from the year, from this year's beeless hive. I had Russians. She says, "Yeah, unfortunately, we're just not." And as an industry, we have a lot of work to do to get on top of bee health. And anyway, if it helps, you're not alone.
Yeah. Well, good job hanging in there, even through the ups and downs. You know, if you're counting on bees for some of your nutritional needs and they keep dying, you know, there's a point where it's not worth the money to keep replacing them if they die. But most people are hobbyists, and if it's just a hobby, you don't mind having to recharge the hive when they die. So keep going, keep trying. We're working on. Frankly and honestly, we do lots better business in terms of just making money at 11 bees if your bees stay alive. So we're doing everything we can to keep bees alive. If you have a good experience keeping bees, then you're going to want more the next year. You're going to want more equipment and more bees, and it's better for everybody. So I think the industry in general wants the bees to stay alive. They're just trying to balance how to do it. So keep trying. Don't give up. All right, we could open the hive up if we. You don't have to open the hive up with a specific purpose in mind. We're keeping bees quite often, most of us, just for the fun of it. So if you just want to look at some bees, it's just enjoyable to open up the hive and see what they're doing, then go right ahead and do it. You don't have to. You don't really have to accomplish anything other than just going to have a look at your bees. So we can do that now if we want. But if we have a specific question about how to identify something going on in a hive, now would be a good time to send it in to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't you get started on that, and I'll tell you if we get some questions.
All right. Let's show you what a really good brood pattern looks like.
Okay, that's a good one. Let's see. I'm trying to make sure that you can.
Now, by the way, I hesitate to say anything because as soon as I say something, I'm going to get stung right in the end of the nose. But you can kind of guess after you've been at it for a while what the temperament of the bees is going to be like before you get in the hive or shortly after you open the lid. So put your bee veil on just in case. And make sure your smoker's going before you get in the hive. Pre-smoke your bees. So looks like the smoker went out. Maybe. No, it's going. Hang on a sec. Okay, well, it's kind of going. I'll just give it a little boost. I put some wood chips, chunk of bark in there along with the burlap so that the burlap burns first and then gets the tree bark going. And then it'll smolder for quite a while. It's cottonwood bark. Cottonwood bark burns pretty clean. That's why I use it.
Do you guys have some favorite smoker fuel where you live?
You get less of all this buildup and junk around the smoker if you use something that's clean burning, right? So pine needles, pine straw, that'll make that really bad. You'll stick the lid down on your smoker after you use that stuff. Makes great smoke, but it makes a great mess too. All right.
There's some bridge comb there.
I'm going to take this frame feeder out first. I can take that out without a lot of trouble. I don't smash many bees when I take that out first. Now I'm going to move this frame over into the space. Now when I take this frame out, it comes out a lot easier.
Look at that pollen.
We've got pollen in the middle. They've got a little bit of brood there. There's a queen cup.
Do you want me to bring the computer closer? I don't know
if you want.
what the focus is like for ya, but we can see a lot of honey and a little pollen on that one.
Okay. And since we are, since nobody has something specific for us to look at right now, we're going to harvest a piece of chunk honey right now. Ready?
So this is one of Stan's middle bar frames, and it has like the middle bars going across the center. And he builds those mostly just for himself. Oh, let's see. It's backwards than I think. Maybe I'll just set it back down. Maybe that's better than wiggling back and forth.
All right. Who wants some honey? I went and modified my hive tool just for this purpose, and I designed the middle bar frame just for this purpose. We discovered lots more useful things for the middle bar frame after this, but here's what it does. So if we wanted this to fit in a cassette, one of those 4x4-inch cassettes, I'm taking this out of a piece of honey that doesn't have brood in it.
Oh, there we go. Maybe we could see a little better.
I got the cleanup crew cleaning up what I'm spilling there right away, see? So we're not wasting any honey.
Joe says that he always uses pine straw for smoker, but he requires monthly cleaning.
Yep, you got to clean it. It makes great smoke, no argument. It just makes a mess.
Maybe not everyone has 100-year-old cottonwood trees in their yard. Okay, so you're cutting from the back.
I'm cutting the back so you get a picture of what I'm doing instead of the back of my hand.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. We see the knife poking through there.
Yeah.
Ooh, look at that honey dripping down.
Hey, there we go. There's a piece of chunk honey.
I'm going to sell that. Just kidding.
Well, I'll let that drip just for a second so I don't make a mess here where I set it down.
Normally you have a drip tray to do that, right?
Yeah.
Do you want me to get you a plate?
Yeah, normally we don't harvest this right out of the, can you look at the screen here? I'm not sure if we're still on.
Oh. Okay. We just got, yep. All right. We are, there was just a notification on the other thing. Okay. Do you want me to go get you a plate?
No, we can put it right on this. Okay. All right. So let's keep looking. I guess we'll look on the next frame over and see what's going on. So there's one way to harvest honey. If you don't want to crush and strain, you don't have an extractor, you've got some foundationless frames, then you can harvest honey that way. We'll put this right back in for a refill. I'm going to put this empty towards the back of the box, so any honey dripping off that will land on the floor instead of running out the front porch. Then the bees can clean it up before it gets away.
Want to
All
set
right.
that up here, or
Well, yeah, let's put this. I'll put this over here. All right. Next frame over's got a bunch of brood on it. Everybody look at this. Here's what your brood pattern should look like. So there's a few empty spots in between, not many though. It's pretty solid. So if you're interested in a good healthy brood pattern, what it should look like, it looks like that. Both sides about the same. Honey in the corners, brood in the middle.
just like it should be.
Yep. So you can see the difference between capped over brood. It's a little bit darker color, and capped over honey. We'll keep an eye out for the queen. Maybe we'll find her in here. She is marked. I marked her. She's got red on her.
This year's queen, huh?
All right. Somebody asked me a question. Well, I know we've got a bunch of people watching here. Now's your chance to get your questions answered.
She says, let's see. Marmy says, do you usually use foundationless frames?
Yes, I usually do. Not all of them. Most of my frames in here have foundation, and a certain percentage of them don't. So the bees, if just naturally left alone to draw their own comb, would have up to maybe 20% of it in drone comb size.
So you want to show them those drones?
Yeah. While we're in here, look at this. So this doesn't mean there's anything wrong. This small amount of drones in a worker comb doesn't mean we've got laying workers. It's just the queen misfired or mismeasured. So you can see the difference between capped over workers and capped over drones. These stick out a lot further.
The drones do.
The drones do. And they're rounded on top. They're round on top instead of flat. They cap over worker brood, mostly flat, and these are round. So we've got drones inside this cell. Drone bee, drone bee.
You're like
drone bee. I'm checking for mites right now is what I'm doing. I'll pop these open and see if there's any mites, and I don't see any. So typically you'll see those along the bottom bar is where they'll make those drone cells like that, where the cell's a little bit distorted. But occasionally you'll see one right in the middle of a frame like that. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong. I'm saying there's nothing wrong here because look at all of the good, healthy, solid worker comb, that worker brood in that comb that we have. So an occasional one like that's no big deal. There's 2 frames of brood. Okay, next frame in, we've got a lot of pollen in the middle. We've got some brood that's still emerging here. Got a queen cup, nothing in it.
And then honey around the edges. Yeah.
So now here's an occasion, something to learn from this. So this brood around here, you might think, oh, well, I've got a spotty brood pattern. Well, it's spotty not because the queen's failing. It's spotty because there's a whole bunch of pollen scattered around in there. So naturally, it's going to be spotty. So over here, we can see a good spot, open space, and we can see larvae in there, nice and shiny in the bottom of that, where we can see day-old larvae just emerging. So if it has a spotty brood pattern, it doesn't necessarily mean the queen's failing, doesn't necessarily mean there's disease or something wrong. It just means that the timing for the queen to have uninterrupted space wasn't just right. It had something else going on there when the queen was trying to lay in it.
Had stuff in the way.
There was stuff in the way.
You still looking for the queen? Oh, there she is.
Oh, okay. There's queen bee right there. So this queen bee is
I'll go closer, so.
This queen bee is a Russian queen. She's a little bit lighter colored. She's kind of stripy.
Will you point to her?
Yeah. So when I first tried some Russian bees 20-something years ago, they were really dark black, skinny, strange looking, almost looked like a black wasp. Then the next time I tried them, they were more like a carniolan. They were black, but they had more of a European conformation to their shape. Now we've got some Russian queen bees that are kind of Italian colored, or somewhere in between Italians and carniolans.
So they're kind of hybridized. You
So
think?
they've been hybridized, but they're as close to pure as we can get, considering it's hard to find a isolated mating yards. But if the characteristics of them are still true to the Russian type of bee, then what do we care what color she is? So as long as they're good at keeping the mites out, great. So personally, I prefer a lighter colored bee, but that's just a cosmetic thing. All right, so we know we got a good queen in there, not only because we saw her, but because we saw a really good brood pattern, and we've got nice bees. So so some people want to keep Italian bees because they're nice bees, and some people want to keep carniolan bees because they're the nice ones. Some people don't want to keep Russians because they're the mean ones. Well, you can see how mean this colony is. So
It seems like there's a range in temperament for every breed of bee, right?
yes. So what I'm saying is that if you're reading a list of characteristics of different bees, they're not always mean and they're not always nice. I'm sure these will get mad at me later in the summer.
When you're still in there, honey.
Yeah, when I'm still in lots of honey and it's not quite so favorable conditions outside.
So did these bees start out as a nuke this spring?
Yes, I made up the nuke. I made up a little 4-frame nuke and introduced a queen bee, a Russian queen bee that we purchased, and to them. So here we are mid-July, and they're moving right along. They've about filled up a 10-frame box. There's another frame of partial frame of brood. They got brood in the middle and honey, a bit of honey on the corners. They're still working on some of the foundation here.
Okay, so Joe Ellen Woodworkers and Apiary says, do you use formic acid for mites? If not, what do you use and when? I have used oxalic acid vapor and Apivar. I plan on using formic acid this fall. And then someone also asked, what's better about lighter queen bees?
What's better about lighter queen bees?
Yeah, maybe talk about that and then talk about the formic acid or the mite treatments.
Yes, we have used formic acid before. I've tried it and it worked really well. It's more specific on when you put it in and the temperature and all of that stuff, and it makes your eyes water. But it was effective at knocking out the mites. They got through the winter. The last colony that I remember using it on last year, it got through the winter the strongest out of all those bees in that bee yard, the ones we used formic acid on. So it's effective.
But you usually use oxalic acid?
Usually we're using oxalic acid, and that can be administered in several different ways. That's you can dribble it on there. You mix it with some sugar. You can fog them.
Glycerin.
Or you can use glycerin. Glycerin and oxalic acid, you soak that in a saturate a shop towel or a Swedish sponge or something like that with it, and the fogging method, you can use glycerin oxalic acid mixture with that too, or you can use it straight, or you can mix the oxalic acid with sugar syrup and dribble it on. So there's 3 different ways to administer that oxalic acid. And I'm reluctant to give you the recipe exactly right now because if I did off the top of my head, I might get it wrong. And so look for that elsewhere. But you'll find plenty of recipes for oxalic acid dribble if you want to use that. All right.
And then what about the timing of it?
The timing oxalic acid dribble, we used to only do that in the wintertime. It was more effective when they were clustered, but that's not necessarily true. It can be used effectively at another time of the year. You can use it during the summer. now wouldn't be a bad time to do it if you're not planning on taking any honey from your bees. It wouldn't be a bad idea to treat for mites now or middle of July, so the mite population is going to be the highest in August. And so if you wanted to treat them now, you'd have a head start on that mite problem.
Mm-hmm.
So
So there, do you recommend that formula that's like depending on how long your summer is, you determines the number of mite treatments you do?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that one. We treat for mites when we can or when we need to. Um, so yeah, depending on where you live, what your climate is, where you're at, you may want to treat sooner or later or more often. But the only way you really know what you need to uh, treat for and when is if you'll test them. Get in there and test them, test to see if there's mites in there. So um, we're going to test these Russians to see if how they're doing with their mite load. That was the whole point of the Russians. So we're going to test it a little bit later. There's still some bees in here left over from the nuke I made earlier this season. So once that all of the bees have changed order, in other words, all the foragers have died off from the previous colony, the previous queen that I took the nuke out of, then we'll have a better idea how these Russians are doing with their mites. So we'll test them coming up a few more weeks and then decide whether they need a mite treatment or not. Hopefully, if they're doing the job, they won't need a mite treatment.
That's what we try for.
Yeah.
So then why do you like the lighter color bees? Oh wait, sorry. Can't you just do oxalic acid to their feed?
No, they don't like the taste of it. So when you mix it with sugar syrup and dribble it in there, they track it around all over the place. They're reluctant to clean that up. And so there's certain medications that you can put in the bee's feed, but that's for a different problem. That would be more like for foul brood. You can mix that with powdered sugar, and the bees will pick that up and consume it. And when they consume it, then it's most effective. So the oxalic acid treatments don't rely on or the bees picking it up and eating it. We don't want them to eat the mite treatment. So the same with some of the other treatments, they're not consuming it. It's external use only kind of thing.
So you want the mites to get it in their system, not the bees.
Yeah, and I don't know that even if the mites aren't consuming it. So oxalic acid deteriorates; it etches away at the cuticle of the bee, or the well, it does the bee also, but not enough to hurt the bee much. But it will kill the mites. So it's an external treatment, external application. Yeah.
Where the treatments for foul brood, since it's a gut disease, then
Yeah,
you want them to eat it, and then it.
Right. That's a bacterial disease, so we want to give them an antibiotic for that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Now the question: what's better about lighter bees? Like, why do you like them more?
One reason I like the lighter bees is because the queens are easier to find. Those darker bees, the dark queens, they don't catch your eye as much as a lighter colored, solid color abdomen on a queen does. So they're just easier to spot. That's one reason that I like those. So a bee, some of the queen bees that we have from our feral bee project, they're kind of stripy. And if they have bands on their abdomen like the workers do, they're really hard to spot. You can search forever for a queen bee and not find her. So people have enough trouble finding their queen bees. We still have many people, many of our customers that have kept bees for years say that I've never seen the queen. So we want to make her easier to spot. So that's obvious because we've taken some other measures to make sure that the queen's easy to find. When we mark her, we put a paint dot on her back so she's easier to locate. So there's quite a few instances when it's nice to locate the queen and locate her quickly. So the lighter bees are easier. And I suppose it's just personal preference. That's the kind of bees that Grandpa kept. That's the kind of bees that were the most popular is the Italians, and they're generally a lighter colored. So
it's just preference.
It's just preference. Some people like those dark queens. They think they're the most beautiful. Whatever you like. We just like alive bees. So my favorite color of bees are the ones that are alive. So if those happen to be dark, great. That's fine.
Okay, let's see. I'm looking for. Okay. Okay, I don't see any more questions. New to the channel. Where are you located?
We're in Utah, and we've moved from Utah County. We used to be in Provo. Now we've located our business and our home in Sanpete County. Spring City is where we're at. Wonderful place, just not that great of a place to keep bees. So I have to commute. I got to commute to work now up to my old bee yards where it's a little bit warmer and a little bit lower elevation and more forage for the bees. So that's not always true, though. Now I'm taking them up even higher. I'm going to take them up and get to take advantage of all these wildflowers this year that are higher up in the mountains. So, in fact, I think I'm going to be moving some bees tonight up to 9,600 and something feet elevation.
Woo!
Yeah, lots of wildflowers because of all the snow this year. So that's what we're doing. But they won't be up there for very long. That's kind of a temporary thing while the wildflowers are blooming. So, all right, give me some more questions, please.
Okay. Oh, I'm in Darlington, South Carolina. Awesome. Welcome. We're glad to have you.
Send me a question, Michael.
Okay, we are in a dearth. Been that way for a while. Yeah, we were until this last year. We got so much snow, we couldn't even see our beehives.
Yeah, we had some bees that were clear buried. We didn't know where they were. Just had to dig with a snow shovel to get them out. So that we're usually in a drought and a dearth here. So, but this year we've got plenty to do so far. I mean, we could dry up and blow away yet, but we still have plenty of water here now. So dearths are a bit of trouble. It's kind of a stop and start cycle for the bees. So it makes it hard for them to guess when they need their peak workforce to take advantage of peak flower blooms. And if you've got a dearth, then the bees might have too many mouths to feed at a time when there's no nectar coming in. And then when the nectar does come in, they don't have enough workforce to go get it. So it's really helpful to have a consistent nectar flow throughout the summer. So I guess the best way to solve that one is to have some options on where to move your bees to. So if it's drying out like it is right now down in the valley, and the farmers just cut all the alfalfa, and there's nothing else happening right now, I just pick the bees up and move them someplace where there's flowers. So take the bees to the nectars instead of wait for the nectar to come to the bees. That's the best way I found to deal with the dearth. Now, I know that most people can't really do that. You got a couple of colonies in your backyard, and you don't have a pickup truck, and you don't feel like staying out late at night moving bees, then it's not always practical, but that's an option for you. The other option is to feed them during the dearth. So, all right. Thanks for tuning in there. Let's ask.
Okay, I had a lot of robbing from putting WWR supers back on, War supers back on, after extracting in April and May. Had to freeze and really messed up here. What put wets on again?
So you put the stickies back on. We call them stickies sometimes. After you've extracted, they've got a residue of honey on them, sure, and that's hard to prevent robbing. So if you put them far away from the colony and let the robber bees pick them up, then that's probably the best way to do it. So if you don't put them right back, did you put them near the colony or did you put them back on the colony? So says you put them back on the hives after extracting. So keep an introducer in there, and if you've got a bee tight place, you can put them until robbing's not a threat, or in other words, wait until there's some flowers on. Then you could put your stickies back on for a refill. That's probably a better way to do it. So the best thing you can do there is just be aware of the times and occasions when the bees are likely to rob, and then you can avoid that. So incidentally, putting a sprinkler on the bees keeps them from robbing. They think it's raining, they'll go home. That'll give you a temporary fix anyway. Let's see. Another question. Could you okay the boxes on a regular basis for
oxalic acid?
Yeah. for mite control. Um, yes, you can if you wanted to treat by the calendar. I don't recommend doing that though. We were trying to use less treatments rather than more, and then only use those treatments when we need it. Because if we continue to do things for the bees, we'll never know which ones have some mite resistance and which ones don't. So I really would discourage treating on a regular basis, just in case. And I know a lot of commercial beekeepers do that. Um, their paycheck depends on their bees not failing. So if it means putting in a putting in a treatment, whether the bees are sick or not, just to get through that next season, then they're going to go ahead and do it. So, and I'm not going to tell you that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. But I'm telling you that if we ever want to make any progress, we've got to have survivor stock. We've got to have some bees that can take care of themselves. So we'll never know if we got mite resistance if we're treating all the time. We may have it, we may not. We won't know. So there's a fine line in between just not treating and letting the bees die. If they die, then what good did it do you? Um, so we've got to find a way to find. We got to have a balance there. Yeah. Okay. Another question again from Michael. I made the mistake of to put back on hives this year. We had a freeze and let's see. Is that the same question? Do we get it twice? Did it come through twice? Yeah, that's the same one. No.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
okay.
wait.
All right.
I think it's a little different. Do you want me to read it to you? Or
Yeah.
it's kind of far from me.
You say.
I made a mistake to put back on hive this year. We had freeze that messed us up here with the blooms. Want to do that again, but was hoping to give bees a jump.
Yeah. Rather than feed your bees syrup, put back on some stickies. So if you don't have a full frame of honey, there's quite a bit of honey left on those sticky frames that you've extracted. So um, they are kind of trouble to keep around because those wet frames can attract earwigs and wax moth and other pests. Um, so you kind of have to be careful, take more care on how you store those things, but they are a good source of feed. Throw on a box of wet frames next spring after you've extracted in the fall, and it might save you having to feed the bees some syrup. So if you've got the storage space to put them, so the wax moth won't get in them, that's not a bad idea. We'll give your bees a jump. So you just have to do it right to keep it from causing robbing or messing up your frames because of wax moth or something else.
So if he wanted to like prevent some of that robbing, could he put an entrance reducer, or maybe since it's up higher where the bees are not, like?
Yep, if you have an entrance reducer, that'll help keep the robbing down. That means less guard bees at the entrance that have to guard the space where bees are coming and going. That'll help prevent robbing. You can get a robbing screen. I've accidentally stumbled on a good robbing screen. It's more of a moving screen, but it worked like a robbing screen also, with a little entrance just above it that I could open or close. So the hive bees can find their way back in, but the robbers are in a big hurry and they're just bouncing off the screen. So use an entrance reducer. And feed bees at night. Don't feed them more than they can pick up in one night. Don't spill syrup around the hive. Don't leave empty frames out near a hive that would attract robbers. And then once they clean up the empty frame or the spilt honey, then they'll move over to the hive and start robbing. So there's lots of little things that you can do to minimize robbing. You just don't want it to get it started. Once it gets started, it's almost impossible to stop without moving a hive. There's things you could throw a sheet over the hive. You could put a sprinkler on the hive, but those are just temporary fixes because those robbers will be back the next day. So the only way to do it is maybe to temporarily shut it down so the robber bees don't get in there and kill your queen and just disband the hive completely, and then move it someplace else. That's the best way to deal with robbing on a small scale. Now, if you're a commercial beekeeper in a big apiary, that's not necessarily an option. So you might just have to sacrifice a few colonies. Sometimes it just happens they're going to get robbed out. So, I remember one of the strongest colonies I had ever had late in the season. They got robbed out. They were too high and too heavy and too full of bees for me to move and reduce down to 2 boxes so that I could move them. So I had a friend help me lift them on 4 boxes high onto the truck and moved them. And a couple of weeks later, when we got back to them, they had all been robbed out. Super strong colony, really mean bees, super defensive, and they got robbed out and all the honey was gone. The queen was gone and they were all dead.
Sometimes you do the best you can and they still go.
Yep. So anyway, robbing's kind of a scary thing. It's when there's a robbing frenzy in your middle of it, it's hard to shut down. So,
oh man, he had 42 colonies and now he has 22 colonies.
Oh, well, that's that's still close to 50%, isn't it? That's not too bad. I wouldn't feel too bad. We've suffered more losses than that all at once. So yeah, we want a better percentage than that. The average actually is 35%. So you're not too far behind the average, but could have been worse.
So. Then why do we do it?
Yeah.
We're addicted, I guess.
Yep.
Anyway.
All right. Well, let's see. If nobody else has any more questions about inside the hive, what do you want to do? Shall we wrap it up, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, probably wrap it up. I was going to say that if you're interested in learning more from us, you can go to thehoneycompany.com. We have 6 really good online courses that you can take and learn a ton about bees. And that's a good place to find us if you want more, or here on our YouTube channel. We're posting videos every week, and every once in a while we do one of these Ask Me Anything live sessions. So yeah, we'd love for you to come along with the ride with us.
Yep.
As we're trying to figure it out too, right?
Right. So tell your friends and tune in again later, and watch the Honey Company for more fun content, information, and about lots of different things. We're coming up with new products all the time. We got some good new products coming up. Tell them about your bee veils.
Oh yeah, I'm so bee veils like this, which are really fun to make. And I have a huge batch coming up. They're finished sewing, but I need to add like the metal ring still, and then you'll find those you'll find those available on our website too. So you can be stylish like me.
And she put drawstring in there that keeps the bees from crawling in there too. So
yep. So the original design, this one is the first one we got, and it does not have a drawstring. It used to have an elastic like a long time ago, but it's 30 years old, probably 25 years old. So the elastic's long rotten out. Anyway, the latest model, I put a drawstring so you can kind of go around and tie a bow and keep them so they don't fly up your throat when they're mad. And it's nice because then you can wear your own clothes, like you can wear your long sleeve shirts. It's a nice hot weather bee veil. And then I also wear them like if there's a lot of mosquitoes out, or if the sun is hot, like earlier we were wearing them as a sun protection. But anyway, they're a great mosquito veil too. So anything else, and they're really cute. The fabric is fun. Yep. They have bees all over them.
You got lip balm. You got some cool earrings coming up. I've got some more products directly for the beehive too coming up soon.
Yep. So somebody said, let's see, Galloway Lights said we need manly ones too. So I made some plain white ones, and a lot of them are kind of girly. I'll work on that. I'll get some like camo, or
she made a camo one. They sell pretty quick. Yeah. So
every time I make camo, they're gone like that. So I'll have to just get more camo fabric, but they're really fun to make. And anyway, there's a sewing pattern available, and we're always making little things to sell and to, I don't know, add to our product line. And
camo's pretty cool, but you can't really hide from the bees. So, that's more for you rather than you can't hide from the bees. It's
hot here too. Never been to Utah, so don't know the weather. We're in a high desert, so it gets hot here too. But we don't have the humidity, right? Some of you, like in Georgia or South Carolina, you guys got it way worse than us. We just have that dry heat, but it can get above 100.
Yep. It was 99 the other day. Salt Lake City got 106, I think, 2 days ago. So we're plenty hot enough.
Yep. We got the extremes, really hot in the summer and really cold in the winter.
Bees
so.
do okay in hot weather, though. When it gets in the 90s, they really get
Mhm.
buzzing good. Insects like the warm weather.
Yep.
So
They like it.
Yep.
Anyway, anything else that you wanted to add?
I guess not for now. That's all I had to say for now. So thanks for tuning in with us, and keep your bees. Come again.
Joe says just with bees on them. Yep. Awesome. Okay. Thanks for watching. I'm going to end the stream now. Let's see. Okay.